What happens when a boss goes undercover in his own company, only to uncover truths that change his life forever? William Will Matthews was not your average CEO. At 45, he was already considered one of the most successful men in the retail world. The retail empire he had built from the ground up, a chain of stores known as NextStep, was flourishing. Will's sharp mind and intense work ethic were legendary. He was the kind of man who pushed everyone around him to be better, faster, and smarter. But there was one thing about Will that few knew. He was becoming disconnected from his employees, his company, and the real world outside of board meetings and profit reports. Most of the time, Will operated from behind the scenes, living in his luxurious mansion, attending gala dinners, and leading meetings from a safe distance. His presence at the stores was almost non-existent. And yet, the company was thriving. At least, that's what he thought. One day, while sitting in his office, going through the endless spreadsheets, Will realized something. He hadn't been to one of his stores in over 6 months. He hadn't interacted with his employees directly in a long time. Sure, he had been in touch with managers and the higher-ups, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He needed to see the company from the ground level again, not from the perspective of the boardroom. And so, with a quiet resolve, Will decided to go undercover. Will Matthews didn't want anyone to recognize him, so he used a simple disguise, a different name, a plain shirt, and a pair of old jeans. He would become Jim, an average man, just like any other employee. His goal was simple: to learn what it was like for the workers on the front lines, to understand what challenges they were facing, and to find out if everything was as perfect as it seemed from his corporate office. The store he decided to visit was one of the oldest in the chain, NextStep Plaza, in a bustling neighborhood. It wasn't as polished as the newer stores, but it was busy. Will walked in, his heart beating a little faster than usual. There was a sense of excitement and nervousness. As he stepped inside, the familiar scent of freshly unpacked goods and the hum of the cash registers filled the air. The store manager, Jason Ford, was a young man in his mid-30s, dressed in the usual uniform, a polo shirt with the company's logo on it. He seemed to be running around, taking care of customer complaints, directing staff, and restocking shelves. Will watched him for a moment, admiring his dedication. But Jason's face looked tired, like he was carrying a burden too heavy for one man. The floor staff moved in a blur, rushing between aisles, trying to keep up with the steady stream of customers. There was a noticeable tension in the air. Employees didn't smile much, and the usual chatter between coworkers was absent. Will took a deep breath, watching everything unfold around him. Something didn't feel right, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He approached the security guard, an older man named Rick Calloway, who sat by the entrance, scanning the crowd. Rick looked like someone who had seen it all, with a weathered face that showed years of experience. "Hey, I'm new here," Will said, trying to sound casual. "Do you work here often?" Rick gave him a quick nod. "Yeah, I've been here for about 15 years. Long time. Seen a lot come and go, kid. What can I help you with?" Will smiled awkwardly. "I'm just curious about the store. How's everything been going around here?" Rick's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's been all right, I suppose. But it hasn't been the same since things changed around here. Ever since corporate started focusing more on numbers than people." That caught Will off guard. He didn't know how to respond, so he simply nodded. "People don't talk much about it, but the employees, they're burned out," Rick continued. "It's a tough job, and the company keeps pushing harder, demanding more, but there's only so much you can give before you break." Will was shocked. He had always thought of his company as one that took care of its employees. After all, they were the backbone of the business, right? But now, hearing this from Rick, it felt like a hidden truth was being exposed, a truth he hadn't wanted to see. Rick wasn't finished. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if to make sure no one overheard. "And you know what else, kid? Nobody's happy here. I see it in their eyes every day. They're just going through the motions, trying to make a paycheck, but they're not living. And some of them, they don't even know how to get out." Will's heart sank. He had spent years building his company, growing it, and increasing profits. But all of that success had come at a cost he hadn't realized until now. What was the point of success if the people who made that success possible were miserable? Rick paused for a moment before adding, the worst part of it all? Some of them are afraid to speak up. They think nobody will listen. But the thing is, they'll keep working and working until they hit their breaking point. Then they'll leave, and the cycle continues. Will stood there for a long moment, processing Rick's words. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected to feel like he had failed his employees without even knowing it. Will decided to stay in the store for the rest of the day. He wanted to learn more. He began talking to the employees, asking them about their experiences, their struggles, and what they thought could be done better. He heard the same stories over and over again. Employees working long hours with little reward, feeling disconnected from the higher-ups, and never having enough time to rest or recharge. That evening, after the store had closed, Will stayed behind to talk to Jason, the store manager. Jason was exhausted. His shoulders slumped as he sat down across from Will. I do everything I can for this store, he said, his voice full of frustration. But no matter what I do, it's never enough. The company just keeps pushing us harder. They want us to cut costs, increase sales, and keep the customers happy. But I'm not a magician. I'm just one person. Will listened intently. He had never heard Jason speak with such raw emotion before. The man who had always appeared so calm and composed was now breaking down in front of him. Jason continued, and it's not just the pressure, it's the lack of respect. The higher-ups don't care about the little guy. We're just numbers on a sheet to them. They don't see us as real people. They don't see the late nights, the stress, the sacrifice. They only see the profit margin. Will felt a lump form in his throat. How had he become so blind to all of this? How had he allowed his company to become a place where people felt like they were nothing more than cogs in a machine? The next day, Will couldn't stop thinking about everything he had learned. He thought about the employees who felt invisible, the managers who were overwhelmed, and the security guard who had spoken the truth so openly. He knew that he couldn't just walk away from this. He had to do something. As he walked out of the store, he made a vow to himself. He would make things right. He would go back to the boardroom, not just as the CEO, but as a man who understood the struggles of his employees. He would make changes, real changes, that would ensure no one ever had to feel like they were invisible again. He didn't know what the future would hold, but one thing was certain: he would never look at his company the same way again. Will Matthews learned something invaluable during his undercover journey. Success meant nothing without the people who helped build it. And leadership wasn't about making decisions from an office chair. It was about listening, understanding, and putting the well-being of your team first. As for Rick, Jason, and the other employees at NextStep Plaza, they didn't know it yet, but their voices had been heard. Changes were coming. The company would never be the same, and neither would Will. In the end, Will's story isn't just about the company he built. It's about the people who helped build it with him. It's about the realization that behind every number on a spreadsheet is a person with a story that deserves to be heard. And sometimes it takes walking a mile in someone else's shoes to truly understand their journey. Success is not about what you accomplish, but about the lives you touch along the way. That's the story, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure sharing it with you all. Don't forget to comment below and let me know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see the global reach of these stories. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories, tips, and tricks. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. If you'd like to show some extra love, tap the 3 dots near the share button and send a super thanks.